Hello and welcome to the very first Curing and Oak STEM workshop this week. My name is Cordula. I'm with Karl Mast, the Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths Engagement Center at Waterford IT. I'm very looking forward and I'm very excited to work with you now on this workshop. I hope you're too. I have to say it is one of my favorite workshops, one of my favorite STEAM workshops. So STEAM, that means we are going to talk about science, technology, engineering, art and maths. So that's where the STEAM is coming from. Over the next couple of days, the next 5 days to be more exact, my colleagues Owen and Sheila and myself will be back every day with about 25-30 minutes of STEAM. We are doing this together with Curing and Oak, with the Waterford Libraries, with Creative Waterford and Creative Ireland. As I was saying, we're all very much looking forward to that. We are very passionate about what we do. And we want to show you the fun of science, the fun of technology, engineering, maths, but also that there's a lot of art, a lot of creativity, a lot of imagination in all of those STEM subjects. As a scientist myself, I'm a chemist actually. I actually have to be creative and imaginative in the lab every day. So in my job, it's not just following a recipe, it's not just like making a cake or cooking, but when you do research as a scientist or as an engineer or in any other STEM subject, you need to use your imagination and you need to have a vision of where you want to go, what you want to achieve. And that's what I love about it. And then you need to figure out new innovative ways of actually getting there. And very often, the creative thinking or the imagination of a scientist or of an engineer is guided by issues that they're confronted with in their daily life. And that's why so many inventions, not all of them of course, but a lot of the inventions and a lot of the developments make life easier for all of us. And one of those developments is plastic, of course, one of those inventions that became a huge part of everyone's life and also made life a lot easier for many people. It was only in the recent years that we realized maybe plastic is not as great as we thought it was. Even like thousands of years ago, the natural component rubber was being used, but it was only, I'd say, in the 19th century that, and especially in the 20th century, the plastic became what it is now. So it did start in 1839. There was a German researcher, and he was the first one to produce polystyrene. His name was Edward Simon, or Edward Simon, the English version. He produced the first polystyrene, which we still use today in those kind of foamy cups, coffee cups, takeaway cups. And it was in 1907 that the plastic that we usually refer to as plastic now was being developed. And 5 years later, in 1912, was the first time that cellophane, again, something that we use in the household every day, was being patented. Since then, many more different varieties of plastic were developed. So one of them, for example, are those PET bottles, the single-use plastics, single-use bottles. They were developed in 1940, 41. PET stands for polytetrafluoroethylene, so that's the chemical name for what this one is. But even though plastic became more and more important in everyone's life, mainly because it is cheap and it doesn't weigh much, it's easy to handle, and very often, you just throw it away afterwards. You have all those different types of plastic, like the plastic that we use on our pens. We have the plastic bottles, different type of plastic again. We have the softer kind of plastic, like this one up here. My watch, of course, wristband made from plastic. There's loads and loads. We have packaging, like here, it's a hand cream, again, made from plastic. So before we start this workshop, and in this workshop we're going to use a whole range of different items, all made from plastic. But before we start, I just like you to look around your room, or the kitchen, the living room, wherever you are at the moment, and count the items that you can see around you that are made from plastic. single-use plastic, more durable plastic, items that you think you might have for many, many years to come. Anything you can see around you that is made from plastic, so that can range from probably the device that you're using to watch this workshop. It could be the materials that you already have next to you, ready to use in the workshop. So there's loads and loads of things. Have a look around and count how many things you actually can see that are made from plastic. And then have a think, what is actually necessary? What do you need? Is there anything you can replace? So when I say replace, is there anything that you might not need to be made from plastic, such as shopping bags? So for the first part of the workshop, I hope you all have your materials ready. For the first part, what we need is either your sheet of paper and your scissors. And if this is what you're going to use, I would like you to just cut, little pieces of paper out of your big sheet of paper. You can also use Post-its like these, or anything else. Basically what you need is some small pieces of paper to write on. You need a pen, of course, to write on it. And then I'd like to think of your favorite animal. Mine is a cat. I quite like cats, so I have this big fella here at home with me. Then think about, what does your favorite animal eat? Cats, for example, they are quite keen on, eating mice. He doesn't, but what he likes to do is catching flies or catching little spiders. So cats are carnivores. They eat other small animals. I'd like to write that down. So I'm just going to take one of my Post-its and I'm going to write down cat. So that's the first part. Cat. Cat eat mice. So we're going to write down mouse on our Post-it. There we are. Second one. Then we think about, what do mice eat? I think you see where this is going, so we're going to construct a food chain. A food chain means that we think about an animal, we think about what that animal eats, what the food of our animal eats, and of course also the other way around, like what other animal might eat the animal that we were thinking of. A cat, of course, eats mice. And mice, they live off things like grass or grains. But a mouse also eats smaller insects, can eat some crickets or some snails or worms or some larvae. And those in turn would eat grass. So this is what we call a food chain, because we have, the beginning here, which is the grass or the grains, which are eaten by crickets, by different kinds of insects, by snails, by worms, by larvae, which in turn are eaten by mice. And the mouse, again, can be eaten by a cat. So this is what we call a food chain. It's going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. You were probably just wondering why I just put those crickets and snails and worms between the mouse and the grass and grains, even though the mouse is eating grass and grains as well. But of course, this is another way that we can see here how we can picture our food chain. Just in this case, we have the cat eating the mouse, and the mouse eating both grass and grains, but also the crickets, the snails, and so on. So what we have here is not exactly a chain anymore, but it's more like a network. This is also important when we look at, what's going on around us. Not everything is a straight chain in terms of who or what is eating what, but very often it's a whole network. In the end, actually, it's a whole cycle. But for now, we're going to focus on the chains and the simple networks that we can look at here. Instead of a cat, of course, a mouse can also be eaten by birds of prey, or it can be eaten by a snake, And the snake in turn can be eaten by a bird of prey. So you can see how this network or the chain or the whole cycle is constantly expanding and expanding. And it very much depends on where you live. Here in Ireland, of course, we don't have snakes. But again, your food network or your food chain can change depending on which region on the earth you actually are in and what animals you're going to look at. So let's just look at a summary of what we have so far. We have the pink food chain, which is the first one that we looked at, which is grass and grains, eaten by the crickets, by snails, by worms, by larvae, which are eaten by mice, and the mouse, again, is then eaten by a cat. The other one we looked at was, again, grass and grains and insects and so on, eaten by a mouse, which can be eaten by a snake, which can be the victim of a bird of prey. So that's the second food chain. But you can see how they both have the origin in the grass and grains, the insects, the mouse, and so on. What we can also add in here is a frog, which can easily take the position of a mouse, because a frog also eats insects and caterpillars, and can also be the prey of a snake. So I think you can imagine that those food chains or networks become quite complex. So let's just add one or two more animals. If we look at a rabbit would live off grass and grains, but in turn a fox would catch a rabbit for dinner. It's just two more animals, but again it adds a whole new dimension to the food network, and I think this really shows why every living thing depends on so many other living things, and even the smallest living thing has a huge impact on everything else. That is the reason why biodiversity is so important. So biodiversity means the whole variety of all living things that we have on Earth. And each of those, as you can see, even in this quite small, simple food network, depends on many other living things. And this is why it is so important that we watch out, not just for each other, but also for every little living thing here on Earth. Now, what we've been looking at so far were all animals that live on land. But of course, we also have the ocean to consider, and all the animals, all the living things, not just animals, but all the living things that live in the ocean, that live in the sea, that live in the water in general. And of course, we have all the algae. They are eaten by small fish. They are eaten by larger fish. And of course, we all know that we like eating fish. So this is actually just an example of, how the human beings come into the food chain. So we would eat mackerels, we would eat tuna. So we would be the end of the food chain in that case. Of course, I suppose some of you might have been wondering, I did not forget about the sharks. The sharks are there as well, of course, and they love tuna. So in that case, sharks would actually be our rivals, because we like tuna and sharks like tuna. But that's just what it's like. There's always going to be not just one predator that is looking for certain prey. There's always going to be 2 or 3 or more, usually many more, that are looking for the same kind of prey. If everything is in balance, if the whole biodiversity is balanced out, there would be no shortage. It would just regulate itself. But that also means that we should not be interfering that much. So of course we can also extend that network. If we add the sea bass, I've done that here, they like eating small fish as well. So again, small fish would be the food for larger fish. Sea bass, mackerel. I'm sure you come up with many other fish that I can't even think of right now. And we, as the humans, we like catching a sea bass or having a mackerel for dinner or having some nice tuna in our salad or in our pizza. So this is what my food chain based on living things in the sea might look like. We have the algae, of course. They're eaten by small fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which are then eaten by sharks or by humans, by us. Seabirds also quite like catching smaller fish. We have turtles. turtles live off algae, some turtles live off jellyfish. Jellyfish in turn can live off, smaller crustaceans, or they can live off algae as well. And then of course we have killer whales. Might also come up as one of your favorite animals, and they quite like having a turtle here and there. So jellyfish are part of the food chain or the food network in the sea. And it's not just turtle who eat jellyfish, of course. There's many other animals living in the sea. Maybe you can think of a few. Now, let's have a look if we can make our own little jellyfish in a bottle. And don't worry, it's not going to be a live jellyfish, but we are going to use only materials that we find in the household. And in that case, of course, we are going to use single-use plastics. So we have our bottle. You don't need to fill it with water straight away, but I did it because I think it is easier, and I think when you follow the next couple of instructions, you'll see why. So ideally, you have your bottle filled with water already, not to the brim, but like up to here, totally fine. Okay, our bottle of water. We have a plastic bag. Maybe, just take one that you use for fruit or vegetables at the supermarket. No need to buy a whole new load of plastic bags. We have scissors. Be careful when you handle them on your own. Maybe have an adult with you to give you a hand. Can have markers. I'm going to use these markers here as well. They need to be waterproof, because what you do with those markers is you're going to draw a face or give your jellyfish some color. And of course a jellyfish is going to be in water. So these need to be waterproof. Right, let's give it a go. I almost forget, you might have been wondering, we also need some dental floss. Okay, got it all here now. First of all, what we do is we take our plastic bag and we take our scissors and we cut the plastic bag in half. So the easiest is to just cut off here at the bottom. There we go. So I've just cut the bottom of the plastic bag. Then just cut straight through somewhere. Make sure you cut the handles as well. You end up with a plastic bag like this. Now, and I'm just going to cut it in 2 pieces again. Just going to cut straight through. Just through it there. There we go. So there. And the handle, of course. Okay, 2 pieces of plastic bag. That means 2 jellyfish. So 1 plastic bag is enough for 2 jellyfish. So what you can do, and that's up to you, you can use those markers, any other colors, and take a few minutes and draw any kind of shape, pattern, eyes, give it a face, whatever you want on your jellyfish. But before you start, maybe have a quick look how we're going to make our jellyfish, because that will give you an idea of how exactly to draw the pattern onto the plastic bag. When you just look at it now, this is basically what it's going to look like. This part here, which is the center of your plastic bag, is going to be the head of your jellyfish and the body. Then you tie some dental floss around here, and the rest, this fluttery part here, is going to be the tentacles of your jellyfish. So now when you draw it, just keep in mind that the middle of your kind of piece of plastic bag is going to be the head, and everything that's on the side or on the edges is going to be part of the tentacles. Fantastic! How did you get on? So just to show you mine behind with some white background. This is what I made. Not very artsy, but sure you can all do much better. So I have a green and pink jellyfish, and I'm going to show you now in the next step how to actually make a jellyfish out of it, how to fill its body and its head with water. To do that, I have prepared my bottle here with water, and I also just got a little jug filled with a little bit of water as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to open up the bottle of water. Instead of using my hand to, to give the head some shape, I'm going to put the plastic over the bottle. And right here, where the opening of the bottle is where the head of the jellyfish is. So that's the center. I'm going to push it in. You can see it here. So I'm going to put it in as far as I can. The further you push it in, the larger the head of your jellyfish is going to be. And what I do now is I'm going to fill the head of the jellyfish with water. I'm just going to hold it up so that you can see what's happening there. You can see how the head is filling up. Yeah, you can fill in as much as you like. I'm quite happy with that now. What you do next is you take some dental floss. There you go. That's totally fine. Doesn't need to be too long. It's really just to tie the head. So this is where we are right now. Here's the head of your jellyfish inside the bottle. Here is my dental floss. And I would actually have to say I would recommend using this method even if there's 2 or more of you doing and working together. Because that way you have the jellyfish already in your bottle. And then you now proceed to tie the head. So you can see here I have my dental floss just around there. And I'm just going to tie it off. And yeah, you can see it is already getting a bit messy. So it is always better to have 2 people to give you a hand with that. But of course we manage. So yeah, once you've tied off, it's totally fine. Also, big thank you to the dad who showed me this method, because before I was always using somebody in the workshop, using either glass or using just our hands to make that jellyfish, and then afterwards we try to put it into the bottle. So a dad at that workshop actually came up with the idea of doing it that way. So big shout out to that dad, whose name unfortunately I never got, but who contributed hugely to making this all a bit less messy and a bit easier when you're working on your own. Okay, so there you go. We have our jellyfish. There's the head, the body, and the tentacles, and now we just push him or her completely into the bottle. Make sure get the whole jellyfish inside. And I think you can already see where this is going. So there's my jellyfish. Okay, so we can, the easiest of course if you just take a bottle, and bring it over to the sink and fill it up. I just got a jug of water. I'm going to fill it up here. Carefully up as much as you get in. Right, don't forget to close it off, of course. And you have your jellyfish trapped in your bottle. There it goes, and you can see how it's floating up and down when you turn the bottle. The reason is that there's a lot of air. This air bubble is actually trapped in the plastic, but you also have a bit of air in the body and the head of the jellyfish, and this is why it's always trying to rise up. There you go. You can see probably see the air bubbles inside the water rising up as well, and the same happens to your jellyfish. Here's the jellyfish, and I think it's easy now. I think you can totally understand now how an animal would just mistake this jellyfish here, like a bit of colorful plastic, for an actual jellyfish. And this is why turtles and other sea animals would easily just go try eat plastic instead of the usual food. And that can become extremely dangerous, and because plastic takes years and years and years to degrade. Plastic has a longer lifetime than we do, so it can be several hundred years until it degrades. If this is filling up an animal's stomach, you can imagine that this is not great for the animal's health, especially when they can't digest it. It just stays in the stomach forever, and eventually their stomach would fill up with plastic, with waste, but there wouldn't be any room for anything nutritious, any food, which they would usually use to get their energy from. Okay, thanks everyone for taking part in this workshop. Just take the message that plastic, even though it was a great material for several decades and people swore by plastic, it is not the best material to use. In particular, single-use plastics. Please try to avoid single-use plastics. There are ways to recycle, there are ways to reduce plastic, but the best way, of course, is to just replace it with something else. Thank you very much for taking part again, and I hope to see you again at one of the following webinars. There's 4 more to come. We are all very much looking forward to it, and I hope so are you. Thank you.